Hello everybody, it's Tommy and welcome back to another speed build for the Disney save. Today, we are doing probably my longest speed build that I have ever done on my YouTube channel. Get cozy, get a snack. I know I say that sometimes, but I really mean it for real. If you're here for the whole video, this is going to be a lot. And I'm going to be talking, of course, about the beautiful new build today a lot, but I'm also going to be talking about like an array of topics because there's just so much in the video today that we really have time to kind of sit and chat as well. Today, I am building Snow White's castle from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs in my new neighborhood that I am starting in Ravenwood. I told you guys back in the Black Cauldron, the last video that you would have seen, that the next thing you could expect would be Snow White related things. And the way that I've been really sort of organizing the Disney save recently, especially, is I like to try to keep movies to like a dedicated neighborhood in each world. That way, even if the movies that go in the same world are clashing in terms of time period or maybe architecture style, it doesn't really look that funny because it almost just looks like every neighborhood has its own vibe and its own theming. So up in, and I don't know all of the names of the Ravenwood neighborhoods, I do apologize, but up in the upper eastern side of Ravenwood, that is currently where we are. That is the sprawling hillside sort of section of the map, and you will see in the far background as we go throughout the video, there is those giant heads, like the giant head statues on the hillside. That is where we are on the map. There is a 64 by 64 up in that area, and I knew as soon as I saw it on the map that it was going to be the place to do the Snow White castle. Now, this castle is large. It's a little bit complicated. It's pretty colorful. I wouldn't say it's one of the most iconic of all of the Disney castles. And I guess the reason I say that is because every single time I've ever discussed this castle in my patron Discord, it brings up a little bit of like back and forth. People are not quite sure which castle I'm referring to. I think that this is because the Evil Queen technically is the owner of this castle, so you could call this the Evil Queen's castle, but before it was the Evil Queen's castle, it was Snow's and her family's. And they never really talk too much, especially in the animated version of the story, about Snow's mother. But presumably her mother and father were the former king and queen, and then he, the father, remarried, and she is now living in the castle with her quote-unquote stepmother. So I think that sometimes when this castle gets brought up, it is seen as the Evil Queen's castle. So when I'm like, oh, I'm building Snow White's castle, people are like, oh, you mean the Evil Queen's castle? And then the added wrench in the situation is that there is a prince in this film, and his name is Florian. And he is also a royal, and he has his own separate castle. That castle is shown ever so briefly in the Snow White animated movie. So you could build that. I didn't want to because it's shown so like abstractly from a distance. It is this shining gold, very oddly shaped castle that if I had made, I could have used as a filler, although like a castle as a filler is never like something that's on my immediate to-do list. But I could have done that. And that could also be in some ways called Snow White's castle because she eventually marries him, and presumably she might even move to his castle. I believe one of the last scenes of the film is them together going to his new castle. So she might even go there like after her marriage, and who knows what happens to this castle. It's not really stated either way. I think in the live action, they end up back at this castle, but I also think that the character she ends up marrying is like technically not a prince. So that might be a little bit of the discrepancy there. All of that to say, I am building Snow White's castle that is owned by her family. This is also the castle that Disney as a company tends to use as like her castle. So back when they did the Disney Castle Collection, which I have talked about very frequently in my castle videos, but basically Disney did this castle collection where they made all of these canonized artworks, books, statue replications, and Christmas ornaments for most of the Disney princesses. And this has been sort of a godsend in terms of me using these things to help recreate these spaces. All of the castles that they did in this collection have a somewhat large 3D statue, and I actually now own a few of them. I own Cinderella's castle and Rapunzel's castle, neither of which I have done, but when I do use them, or when I do get to those castles, I will be using both of my versions for the replica version. But I was able to find really good images of someone who owned the Snow White castle from the castle collection. Funny enough, Snow White's castle is one of the rarer and more expensive castles to reacquire secondhand from that collection, and it was super helpful. But it's one of those castles that definitely changes depending on which version of the artwork. If you Google Snow White's castle, you're going to get like a stock image that Disney uses for the covers of books, maybe for t-shirts, maybe for things like that. And it is a little bit more intricately detailed and differently shaped than the 3D model that they created for the collection. So I am always faced with this challenge, and this comes up pretty regularly. I have a bunch of references for the castle. Not all of them match one another. Some of them show entire sections of the castle that exist, whereas the 3D model does not have that. That's pretty common. It's kind of like when they bring something over to Disney Dreamlight Valley and they simplify the intricacies of it so that it makes sense in like the new format that it's being given. But for my version, it's like, where do I go? What do I do? How much detail do people really want? I also have to think about the size, how much room I have on the lot, how heavy this will be on someone's PC, and how much people won't, or how many people wouldn't possibly be able to use it if I go too crazy with it. So I have to meet somewhere in the middle. And ultimately what I decided to do, I built the castle extremely accurate according to the 3D model, but I did add the courtyard that would have the wishing well, which is not featured in the 3D model. And it, I guess, according to the images that I was seeing, it would be technically, I think, on the right-hand side of the castle if you're looking at it from the front. But the reason I put it on the left is because when you are on the overhead map of Ravenwood and you're looking down on this castle, it looked really strange and too open, and it just didn't look like a proper castle. I don't really know how else to describe that. I had originally at one point put it on the right-hand side, and when I was going to the world map, I was so dissatisfied with the way that it looked, and it really took away from the castle. But by putting it on the left side, because the lot is facing sideways from the map overview, you can't see the left side of the castle from the map overview. So adding the courtyard, you don't see it from the map, and that means that it still looks really accurate from the map view, but you still also get the accuracy of actually having it on the build itself. It's just on the wrong side. Hopefully that makes sense. It was one of those decisions where it's like, it's hard. Another one of the decisions that I had to make, and I've done this before, I believe I did this with the Beauty and the Beast castle, and this is a little bit of a trick if you ever want to attempt to build something this large, but you really need to get the height in there because we're limited to those 4 floors in The Sims 4. Essentially, I built the castle in 2 sections. The front section of the castle is going to be Snow's section, the public, and also the staff section. And then the back section is going to be for the evil queen, kind of like she's taken over that back half. But what this does essentially is you're able to create the sense of the castle getting larger as you go to the back, but you're still only working with the floor maximum that you are allowed per the game. So if you split it off into 2 pieces, but you connect them really close, like leave 1 or 2 tiles between the 2 foundations, and then put a set of stairs that actually lets you cross between. And at one point I even toyed with doing the courtyard in the middle of them, but it made the castle too long from the front, so it didn't look very good. Once I put it very close like that, and then I ended up connecting it up with stairs, it looked not only accurate, but you get that height in the back because you're able to raise the foundation up higher than the front foundation. And since the 2 are technically not touching one another, the game will let you have them at different heights, which normally it will not allow you to do. And that is something I've done in the past for other castles. It is something that I probably will continue to do in the future for castles. There is an ever so slight gap that you will see throughout the video, but I put landscaping in there, I put rocks in there, I put stairs and railings and things to connect them up in a really natural looking way. So it's not going to be super obvious when you're playing, it's not intrusive, and it's going to give the full effect of that grand feel of this absolutely massive castle without losing the height, because essentially the only other way to do it is to build everything else into super large rooms, but we would only have the 4 floors, so it wouldn't get any bigger as you got back towards the end of the castle. And that wouldn't look very good. So this looks much, much better. I ended up skipping a lot of the landscaping in today's video. As you can imagine, it was very tedious. It took a ton of time. I put rocks all the way around the castle. And something that I should mention actually is that in the very beginning, you saw that I was originally planning to build this on top of a foundation that was floating. And then what I was going to do is add rocks underneath it, because one way that this castle is often depicted is that it's on the top of a cliff or hill, mountainside. So when I think of it in my head, I do tend to think of that version of it. However, when you do that, again, you just lose the height, because when you build in the air, you're losing the first floor to the ground. And so even though in my head it was going to work out and I could still make the 3 floors left that I would have had work, you also can't do foundations of varying heights when you build in the air like that. So I wouldn't have been able to make the back end of the castle taller either. And so I ended up just putting it back on the ground, but I kept the original footage in so that you could see me building that very first part of the castle. I was using the 3D model and it was coming out really well and super accurate, so I knew it was going to be ultimately what I ended up using, like that piece of it. And I ended up just putting it on the floor, rebuilding the rocks around it, rebuilding with all sorts of plants and trees. I wanted to keep it kind of simple, and I also wanted to think about the fact that even though there are multiple walls to get into this castle, those are just those walls of protection that you would normally see in a castle like this. And so there's like that outer perimeter wall that is the entire length of the lot itself. But then when you get to the courtyard, there's also another wall that traps the courtyard in. And specifically, Prince Florian jumps over that wall when he hears Snow White singing at the wishing well. So it was important to be able to have that as well. So there's like a multi-wall structure, and I felt like that combined with the rocks and the little bit of plants and giving it a little bit of height with the foundation and then using those rocks to like build up around it was going to be enough on its own. And this castle is so big. And as you're going to see as we go throughout the video, there are so many details. There are tons of bedrooms. I believe there is room for 10 or more Sims to be able to sleep here. There are 2 libraries. There is a whole staff section. There's an entire potions room for the Evil Queen. There is absolutely so much here that the details and the bulk of the build is really like inside of it itself. And I didn't want to do these like massive garden areas that would not only make the build heavier, but it was also just going to take away from something on the interior. Like it was going to be too much all combined. Besides cutting a lot of the landscaping, I pretty much kept everything else in the video today, which is one of the reasons why it is so long. One of the only things that you're not going to be seeing is bathrooms. I don't believe I kept any of the bathrooms in. To be honest with you, they're really nothing special. I will be doing a tour video of this. It's just too big to not otherwise do, and I feel like even in the speed build, and from what I'm describing, it might get a little bit confusing here and there, so the next video you'll be seeing should be the tour video. Now, one of the reasons that this took so long, other than the fact that it was absolutely huge, is I got sick again. And like, I feel like if you go back in my Disney Save playlist and you watch videos, every time you get to a castle, I'm gonna say something like, yeah, I just got really sick and I was out for the count for over a week and I had to take a break. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's my body like forcing me to take a break, if it is really just poor luck and bad timing. I've told you guys before, I'm really, really prone to illness. I'm one of those people that if someone sneezes or coughs in my direction, I get like kind of angry because not like angry if someone just like sneezes or coughs. I should specify. If you don't cover your mouth or turn your head away and you just cough or sneeze right in my face, I get like viscerally angry because I know without a shadow of a doubt, I will be sick within 24 to 48 hours. And I was out in London, classic story. Every time I go down into central London and I'm there for more than 2 hours, I always get sick. Somebody coughs right in my face and I get sick. I was down in London, and then I think I came home 24 hours later and I was like, yeah, I don't feel well, but really didn't think anything of it. And 24 hours after that, I had an eye infection of some kind. And then the week following, I was extremely, extremely, extremely ill. Sleeping 24 hours in bed, couldn't breathe, probably COVID again. It happens to me constantly. And it happens around the time that I am doing castles. I'll be like really doing well. I'll have a good amount of work done. I'm on a good schedule. I had just done Horned King's Castle, which was also a really, really big build. But I finished out that neighborhood. I did all of my things. I have some other like life stuff going on in the background. I have a trip coming up that I've been planning for and trying to get things done for. So I've had a couple of like things going on that slowed me down. But in general, I was doing really well and I was going along at a good pace. And then I ended up having to take a break for I think almost a week, if not longer, right after I did this throne room, because I just could not get out of bed. So sad. Every single time this happens. And then I just disappear off the face of the earth for like a week and I come back and I'm like, sorry, there was no updates, guys, to my patrons. I've been in bed dying for a week and now I can get back to it. So besides the normal delay of how long a build like this will actually take you, I added an extra weekend. So it's been like, I don't want to say a month, but I was looking at my videos and my content and stuff, and it probably has been like a good break since the last time I was actively working on something. I'm mostly all better now. You can probably still hear the illness lingering in my voice. It always does. But I did finish this castle, which was great. I picked at it a little bit here and there. Even while I was sick, I would get up and do like 1 or 2 rooms and then go and relax. And that sort of was like working a little bit, but I also really just wanted to have full energy and full thought when I was doing this build. I felt like everything was coming out perfect. The landscape looked great, the hillside, the rocks, the structure of the outside, and then I did this throne room and I was very, very happy with it. And I wanted that same level of attention to detail and happiness with how everything was turning out to be prevalent in the rest of the castle. So I just didn't want to feel like icky and try to do this build and have it be like, well, it's good enough. I wanted it to be perfect. And one of my goals in the back of my head, I think because I've been doing so many refreshes and renovations, I don't want to come back to this castle and have to do like a huge revamp. And I feel like we have enough packs now that I shouldn't get to that point where I ever really need to come back and do like a huge overhaul. So the goal is to like get it right the first time and just do the absolute best that I perfectly can. Now, I will say for the interior as we shuffle inside here, I am so lucky and so fortunate. Again, I have the Disney Castle Collection book. It is this absolutely giant, like as long as my entire arm, tall book that is filled with artwork for each Disney castle. Each chapter is like Ariel, and then it'll show people that live inside her castle or major characters from the story, and then it will show the whole castle, almost as if you've sliced it from top to bottom and you are seeing it in like a dollhouse type view. It'll have all of the rooms labeled, or if they're not labeled, because some of them aren't, it's so heavily detailed that for the most part, you can tell what the rooms are supposed to be. And then you can also use context clues to figure it out. Like, I feel like the rooms that in the book, you're really like, what is that? They label it. And if it's not labeled, it's clearly a kitchen or it's clearly a bedroom. And then there will be additional pages for each castle that show important or highlighted rooms from the castle. And you'll get like zoomed in artwork of some of the more interesting parts of each one. So the reason I love this book so much, obvious reasons, it is canonized artwork of spaces inside of these castles that we never get to see in any of the Disney films. But it helps also to come up with how to utilize the massive build in ways that make sense for like the castle aesthetic and in ways that Disney might utilize it if they got more time to tell the story here. And what I try to do is 2 things. Number 1, if the layout of the castle is showing me that a particular room or the throne room or whatever it may be is located on the right or the left side or the front end of the castle, I try my absolute hardest to get it in the general vicinity of where that is supposed to be. However, I will note that you're basically looking at this from like a dollhouse perspective, and then I'm building in a 3D format where you have layers going backwards. So it's impossible to do it like 100% accurately, but it helps definitely to have some kind of a point of reference of, oh, well, this is supposed to be in kind of like this end of the castle. Some of the images don't really make sense. Like it'll show that on like the 4th floor of Beast Castle is the dining room, and I'm like, it doesn't really make sense that the dining room would be 2 floors away from the kitchen, perhaps. And so I'll keep like things generally a little bit more playable and a little bit more accurate to what I think like humans need. But other than that, I will generally try to go with whatever is being shown. And then on those other pages where they show additional spaces in the castle that are sort of like of importance, for example, back when I did Jasmine's castle, something that they showed was her pillow room, specifically like Jasmine's pillow room. And it had all of her pillows and blankets and her vanity and all of her like buffet stations. It was like very much her space. And the book focused on that being like an important end of the castle. So I put a lot of time in detail and pulled a lot of details from the images and moved it into my version. For Snow White's castle, what they showed, and this was a great utilization of the space ultimately, because it's things I wouldn't have come up with on my own. But the things that they deemed important were the throne room, which was great. I love to have more up-to-date and usable images of the throne room. And so the throne room that I've recreated is very, very much heavily done based on those images, and it's very accurate according to what they have drawn. So I was really happy with how it came out. They also showed the kitchen, funny enough, which is what I'm obviously currently working on. I love when the book really showcases the kitchens, because kitchens are a really difficult space to know what to do with. Number one, we don't really have the items for me to be creating these like medieval-esque or just like royal old school castle princessy kitchens, in my opinion. We're missing a lot of those appliances that I feel like would fit in for the theming of the story. I feel like kitchens can be repetitive. And if you're not using a lot of modern looking items, which obviously I can't for kitchens of this nature, there's only so many things that you can use. And then I struggle to find ways to repurpose them. So if I have a starting point and I know the color palette, and that's why I went for these like richer brown tones specifically in this wing of the castle. It's not really my choice, and it's not something I would necessarily think of for Snow White, especially because the rest of the castle is more white, clean marble and like brighter colors and bright drapery. This end of the castle ends up being warmer tones, tiling, stone, deeper wood colors, and that's really great. It was like a perfect jumping off point, and everything I'm doing in the kitchen is very, very much a recreation of the image that was shown. So that was awesome to have. Another one is the potions room, which is going to be shown later on. The Evil Queen will be a spellcaster, and obviously she is going to need lots of space to do creepy magic. I put lots of apples. There's some apple trees on property, things of that nature. We will talk about it a little bit more when we go to her end of the castle, but it was nice to have that. I also saw that according to like the big image, this wasn't one of the ones that they focus on for the other pages, but according to the big scale image of Snow White's castle, they do have some kind of a dungeon here. I was not able to do a full dungeon, and I'll talk about that when we go downstairs, like I did for Horn King's castle. But I also feel like, in a sense, that's not really like the focus of this castle. When I did Horn King's castle, that's my spooky, creepy dungeon castle with like a huge dungeon and lots of dungeon rooms. And if you wanted to play that style of Sims storytelling and have those kinds of themes, that would be the castle that you do it with. And there is usage for a dungeon here because the person who technically owns the castle at the time of the story being told is evil. So even though the castle itself is like really pretty and light and colorful, she is a very ominous character, and she does need a dungeon for like those types of purposes. But at the same time, this is like a classic Disney princess castle, and I don't really think I've been able to do that so far. Like I, in my head, would put those types of characters in the Snow White, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty sort of category, whereas I've been able to do Merida. And again, She is obviously a Disney princess, but I wouldn't consider her a classic princess. She has a very specific, like, Scottish style castle, and it's actually shown quite a bit in the film, so I had a lot of really great reference. This is the first truly Disney princess classic era castle that I am ever able to do. She was the first Disney princess ever, so she got like all of the first in terms of how we were going to do castles, what they would look like. And for all of that, I feel like when you play here, it is not necessarily most people's intention to use this in like the dark and cryptic, dungeony kind of way that Horn King's castle was. So I wasn't like too worried about not having a lot of focus on that. Instead, I wanted to focus on, I guess, what I'm going to call the more classic elements. And so what this leads into is this is a very top to bottom for the entire structure of what I did here, and also for the characters that are going to be living here, because some of you might be wondering what I did in terms of who would actually fill out the castle, because there are not a lot of characters overall in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It's basically just the Evil Queen, Snow White, the Seven Dwarfs. You have the Huntsman, the Prince. Those are like not very much shown in the film, but they are there. And there might be some like random castle guards and knights and things like that. So when it comes to actually building a castle of this size and thinking about, well, I really don't want the Evil Queen and Snow White to be living here completely by themselves in such a huge build where there should be some kind of like a functioning castle staff. What came in handy and what was super great is I told you guys in my castle collection book, there is a page that outlines characters that go with a movie. And so a lot of these are really obvious if you're talking about certain films like The Little Mermaid, but if you're talking about Snow White, where there just aren't as many characters, you might think to yourself, well, who do you put here? But the book did give me some images of some people that supposedly work inside of this castle and live here. And it's a lot of classic kind of roles that you would think of for a castle of this time period. So things such as castle guardsmen and knights, entertainers, a maid, a major domo. And some of those I have explored before in terms of like Beast Castle, for example, but all of those characters are characters that we know, and they are shown as like those inanimate objects and then personified or actually turned to people by the end of the movie. But I've never done a castle and a castle staff where everybody is very much like classically in service of the people that live here. So when I was doing Horn King's castle, I talked a little bit about this, how like a king and a queen, if they have a castle, they would have like dedicated tradesmen that live with them. They might have a sorcerer that is like the castle sorcerer. They would have maids that take care of cleaning and cooking and take care of getting the princess ready, like handmaids, things like that. But I've never actually done a castle with a whole staff of people that are just basically in service to the main characters that live in the castle without them actually being characters themselves in a Disney movie. In Brave, all of the characters that live in that castle are main characters. They're like the royals themselves, the family, and then they have like Maudie. She's like one of the handmaids or one of the caretakers. So she would be an example of a castle staff, but she is, again, a known character. And then we have, I'm trying to think of other movies. Oh, like the Arendelle Castle. Most of them, Olaf, Kristoff, Anna, Elsa, characters that live there for the most part are main characters from the film. I did add a couple of castle staff, but they're actually shown in some books and in some sequel films and in the background of like the films themselves. But I've never been able to do like a king and a queen, their entertainer, their main maid, a handmaiden, knights. I have never been able to actually just make knights, which is really cool that I'm finally going to be able to approach that. The book also showed a messenger that works for this castle. They don't give names to these characters. I kind of wouldn't expect them to in a sense, but I felt like it would be cool to recreate these characters that Disney did create this artwork for and just use them as like general castle staff. So all of this space is not going to be going to waste. There are, as you can see throughout the build, I'm placing knights everywhere. It's like the suit of armor. It's obviously an inanimate object, and it's a statue that's a part of like early game. But the idea is that those are actually real guardsmen. and they are all guarding different sections of the castle. And then I made a few that you can actually play with. So there's going to be two, at least two knights in the household. We do have knighted suits of armor that are available in casts that I have never had an opportunity to use. I also am making a court jester, very classic sort of idea. I'm making a head maid. And then I'm not going to talk about the rest of the household because I am in the middle of making it currently right now, and I'm not quite sure how I'm going to close out the household. I have a couple of different ideas and I don't like necessarily want to spoil anything if I go one direction or another. But that is going to take up like a lot of the space for the castle. There's an entire section upstairs from this ground floor that I'm currently building on, right above the throne room, that is going to be for castle staff. And it is, I believe, 3 bedrooms, maybe 4 upstairs. So there's lots and lots of room for a very active staff for a castle that is probably very lively, that is currently ruling, and not like Horned King's Castle, where they're kind of just using the castle as a place to be. And he does rule the kingdom, but it doesn't seem like in the sense that this is ruled. Like this seems more in like a governing rule, if that makes sense. This is an active, participating prince and princess household, or I should say queen, because she's the only one that's currently in power here at that time. And I will be moving Snow White back into this household. Back when I added her to the save file, she lived in Henford-on-Bagley, and she was living with the 7 dwarves because that was where their cottage was, and that was the only build that I had at the time available in the Disney save. But I'm going to be moving her here so she can start at the beginning of her story, and you can do whatever you would like with her from that point forward. It does help fill out the household a little bit more, and it obviously just makes sense because at the end of the day, she is the real true royal. It is her castle. She should inherit this at some point, and why not have her start here at the beginning? Now, for the cottage, I'm moving it obviously from Henford-on-Bagley. You guys know that back when I was doing my little refresh on Henford-on-Bagley, I told you I was moving it over here. I am going to be taking a look at it and refreshing it, giving it some updates, refitting it to the new lot that it's going to be going to inside of this neighborhood. And of course, taking a look at all of the characters and everything just to give them a little bit of a refresh. Some of that footage might end up in a future video. Not quite sure yet. It depends on how much work I actually do on it all. So because Snow White will be moving back in here, the question becomes, where is her bedroom? And from what I will say, it appears as though, according to the film, her bedroom is actually in the tower that she sings out of, that windowed tower. When she's in the courtyard and the prince jumps over the wall and she's at the well and she's singing, and then she kind of gets scared and runs inside the castle and goes up to that balcony that leans out over the courtyard. I believe that is supposed to be her bedroom. I don't remember how much of it is actually shown in the movie. I did rewatch some of it. I'm not a lover of this film, if I'm completely honest with you. I fall asleep a lot while I'm watching it. I find it a little bit boring. I'm so sorry. I know it's classic. I know that it did like incredible things for media and it was the launch for Disney that they needed. I totally am like there with the history and I get the importance of it. Personally, I have sat down and watched this film many times, and almost every single time I fall asleep. So I wasn't like pumped to sit down and rewatch the entire thing. So I rewatched a good chunk of it, and I can tell from that scene that that is probably her bedroom, but it's probably not supposed to be her bedroom. It's more likely that she had a more formal princess bedroom that was taken away from her when her father died and the queen makes new rules throughout the castle. She's wearing clothes that are improper for her status, and she's doing chores and things that might also be deemed improper for her status. So I think she's very much treated, obviously, as like staff, as unimportant. And so if she had a really nice formal bedroom in the castle that she is not allowed to use, that would almost make more sense. And then she's being stuck in this like gloomy tower that's dark and much smaller, and that is also going to be included in the build. But what I wanted to do is actually build her real true princess bedroom. Something like this was also shown in the Castle Collection book. It didn't label it specifically as her bedroom, and there were a couple of like really formal bedrooms that were shown that could belong to any number of characters, so I had to take a guess. But I was thinking to myself, it just doesn't make sense that she wouldn't have a bedroom that is nicer somewhere in the castle. So I made her an official one, and this is one that is being kept up with by the castle staff. So it's not dusty, it's not dirty, but it is not being used currently by the princess. But it looks like perfect for her, right? It's got all of her colors, the gold, the red, little pops of blue here and there, very bright and open, especially for a castle of this kind. Greenery coming in from the outside, absolutely beautiful, very colorful and classic, and just perfect for her. But she is not currently at the beginning of her story and where she's at in the Disney save actually going to be using that bedroom. So that's like her room, but she's not allowed in it. But the staff still keeps it up for her because they secretly are all like really nice people and they love her and they know she's the princess and all of that stuff, but she's just not allowed in it right now. What you'll notice actually as we go throughout the interior here, the front end of the castle, I very much designed as this is the public space. This is the area that guests or people that are coming to air grievances from the kingdom that might want to speak to the queen. When they do that sort of like formal throne room grievance type situation, there's a word for it, I can't remember it right now, but that would be like really at the front of the castle because you don't want people like too far into the castle and it's very easy to just walk people right in to those very first rooms. And then as you get sort of like to the next layer of rooms, you're getting to some of the staff spaces, but also some of the entertainment spaces. So these are areas where if they did have formal guests over, you would have the dining room. What I'm building currently is the entertainment room. The entertainment room is one of the ones that was featured in the Castle Collection book as a point of interest. And I thought that this was a really, really great idea. It's something I've not done in any castle. The idea of a space that's dedicated specifically to maybe where a court jester might perform or where someone might play music, or you could do a small party or a ball or a gathering of some kind. And the way that I laid this out is that they have it set up so that you could view somebody play the pipe organ. But you could rearrange this for lots of things. There is multi-tiered platform seating behind that area, so you could sit and lounge. There's a larger seat in the back corner that could be for the queen herself, or probably not the evil queen that we know. Like I can't see her actively having people over and entertaining guests, but perhaps when the old king and queen used to rule, that is something that they would utilize. So they have like larger seating on the platform behind everybody. There's the little mini globe bar in here so that you can get a drink. There is a painting easel. Maybe you could watch somebody live paint, or this might be a room where they do portrait painting for pictures around the castle. I really loved that idea. I thought that was so clever. And I thought it was important that it was shown as like a point of interest in the book for this particular castle. Because Snow White is such an early Disney film, you don't get a lot of her personality. She suffers a lot in terms of like what we actually know about her lifestyle, her interests, her hobbies. But I guess one of the things that you could say is true is that the movie focuses on her ability to sing and like her beautiful voice. Maybe she used to come in here and like sing, and maybe this is where she even learned to sing. I did not put a microphone stand in here because I think that it's a little bit jarring for the time period, but you definitely could. I really, really encourage, like, especially that space in particular. There's another one when we go upstairs to the staff section that you could also rearrange for the purposes of like whatever type of storytelling you're trying to do. But you could just, it is kind of important to note that sometimes these spaces were utilized in multiple ways. Like it wasn't uncommon for a space to be like, this is the entertainment room, and then they would redo all of the furniture in the room to set it up for a certain type of entertainment. So for a performer or a court jester, you would want to clear all of the instruments out and give the stage and have it available maybe as like almost empty, so that they would have the space to perform. But then when you have somebody more musically inclined coming in, you would have the instruments set up and things like that. So I encourage you to rearrange the space the way that you would see it necessary, or like add or take away things depending on what kind of entertainment you actually want to have for the storytelling. But I did set up the preliminary stuff and like certain things in there so that it's there as like as a starter. Attached to that is a very, very small library and a little bit of like a seating area, just a place where you could tuck out of the main entertainment space, but you're still in like that public wing of the castle that's a little bit more quiet. And this is one of, I think, 2 libraries in the castle. So this is also going to be the, I guess, castle staff library. Not that they would really need it too much or probably be allowed access to it according to the evil queen, but I can imagine Snow White, if she is like a princess that was being raised to rule someday. At some point, she would have received some kind of like formal education, maybe been taught to read, those types of things. So that would be like more her section to be able to participate in those hobbies. Basically, the back part of the castle that's raised up on that separate platform is all Evil Queen stuff. And I can imagine, other than the occasional castle staff that has to go over there because they need to clean something or get something or tend to the queen herself, nobody really goes over there. And especially Snow White. I would not see her going over there pretty much ever at all unless she's like summoned to that end of the castle. She would probably very much stick over to this side. So I wanted to make sure that there was enough of everything on this end of the castle where she would almost never need to go over there. But at the same time, keeping in mind that the castle staff also probably tried their hardest not to go over there, and that if they had any kind of guests, they also would not go over there. So it almost ended up being two castles because the front part has everything that you need, and then that back part has everything that you need again, with the exception of a kitchen. So every time there was food, I guess the Evil Queen would come down and sit in the formal dining room, or she would have food taken to her inside of her space. But other than that, she really has no reason to come down here, and they have no reason to go up there other than like tending to her, which obviously they would have to do. And I think that she would very much demand. The throne room is down here, so if she wants to like sit on the throne, obviously she's gonna come all the way down. But I felt like it was like my way of doing, this is Snow's section of the castle, and then this is the Evil Queen section of the castle. And you can add, I guess this is a little bit of like my background idea and just like the things that I'm thinking about when I'm building. But I feel like the staff, for the most part, would really love Snow, and they would very much be still kind of taking care of her. So she's living amongst the staff in a lot of ways, and she uses a lot of their spaces, maybe in ways that she isn't really supposed to or wouldn't be appropriate if her father and her mother were still alive, like ways that that wouldn't actually be happening. For example, her tower bedroom is actually located, as you can see that we're moving to like this side of the castle now, her tower bedroom is located right off of the dining room, and that doesn't seem appropriate at all. That doesn't make sense, and it's not like a good layout for the floor plan, but it was probably formerly a staff room or a closet of some kind, and it faces the courtyard, which in a lot of ways, very cool for Snow, very pretty, but kind of unsafe because it has a lower wall around the courtyard. And in the movie, the prince literally jumps right over the courtyard wall and comes right in. Nothing happens to him, even despite the fact that there are like some kind of guards on the property of the castle. They never run into one another. I specifically did not put knights over on the exterior side of that end of the castle because I thought that to myself, like, well, no knights come running when they hear like his voice or anything. And in fact, the Evil Queen herself actually sees him jump over the wall and come and sing with her from her window of her bedroom. So it was also an easier way to figure out maybe where the Evil Queen's bedroom was going to be, for example. It doesn't seem like where, according to maybe her being a princess, her room really should have been. So she's very much living amongst the staff members, and they take care of her, and they've taken her in that way. And that's another reason why I felt like it was nice to add in some more characters that, although are like not nameable Disney characters in the movie, and I'm always hesitant to do stuff like that. I don't really like making characters that you never see or characters that you can't immediately recognize. I think because the theme is here, and it's an idea and a theming that I haven't gotten to do, but I wanted to really make sure that it was done, and also to bulk up the household and give Snow White like some semblance of like friends and things to do. It was ultimately a good idea. I want to note as we go throughout the castle that there is a repetitive use of the same couple, I would say 9 or 10 framed paintings that I'm using throughout the castle. It's not ideal, but unfortunately, just because of the age of the entire like theming, I didn't really feel like most of the paintings in the available selection were very usable. I couldn't have any kind of photographs. I needed everything to look as though it was hand-drawn or painted. And then a lot of them are depicting, even if it's like hand-painted, it's depicting something that's like geographically inappropriate for this castle or for the time period. And it really, really limited the paintings that I was able to do. So I knew I wanted to do like a mini gallery inside of the dining room. And I'm actually going to be doing a second full gallery in the end of the Evil Queen's castle later on in the video. But I really didn't have the paintings and the appropriate things to do so. So I put stuff in there for now, but don't be surprised if I actually replace a lot of those with some stuff off of the gallery. I'm going to see what I can find in terms of things that people's Sims have painted and see if I can retrofit some frames and things onto them that are not so modern looking, because honestly, it's just the same couple of paintings over and over again. And if you look throughout the castle, you will notice, because there's so much space in here. I tried not to do too many paintings on like random walls or in bedrooms even, so that I didn't overutilize them. But if I did like 2 galleries and a lot of them use the same paintings, that is a little bit of a tough thing. So I'm hoping to go in and replace some of those. But at the time of me building this, I had my updates shut off and I was not able to access the gallery. So I couldn't look around and see what I could find in terms of adding things. I don't think I'm going to add any like CC free, like Snow White paintings or anything like that. Maybe if I can find certain things on the gallery. I'm not sure that I really want to do that. I just want something that fits the time period a little bit more. So for that front part of the castle, we have the throne room, we have Snow White's princess bedroom, we have the kitchen. Off of the kitchen, there is a pantry. There's also a small staff dining space. I believe I included some of that footage here. We have a more formal dining room, a entertainment space. Off of the entertainment space is a very small library. And there are a few, I believe there's 2 bathrooms in this section of the castle that I didn't include in the video. And then the last thing that makes up this area is Snow White's tower bedroom, which I included some of the bits that come from her room, like the drapery and some of like the wood tones and the colorings and things like that. But I wanted to change a lot of the items to ultimately be stuff that is a little less nice. Maybe some repurposed staff items, maybe some things that they already had in there because the room was supposed to be for some kind of castle staff that maybe tends to the kitchen, like maybe it was the chef's room or something like that. And now she's living in there. So it's just not as nice. It's still nice overall. Like a lot of the staff bedrooms in this castle in general are not poor in any way, shape, or form. But what you'll notice about her bedroom in comparison to some of the other staff bedrooms, she got the darkest, smallest room in the castle. And that's by design. It's not my choice. It's not what I would do for poor Snow, but it's definitely what the Evil Queen would do to poor Snow. I also want to mention that you might be confused if I don't point this detail out, why it is that I keep putting peafowl banners all over this castle. So for some reason, peafowls are like associated with the Evil Queen. She has a few in her throne room. There is a large display of peafowl feathers like behind her on the throne. That's one of the reasons why I used that sink from, I think, Get Famous, possibly Realm of Magic, and I sized it up and turned it around, and it has like the feathers going behind the throne. And you might have thought to yourself, why did you put a sink back there? If you don't immediately like remember what this throne room looks like, there is the theming of peafowl throughout the throne room. And I thought that in the idea of making sure that when you do like royal households, there is some kind of like a royal emblem, insignia, something like that, that would be marked on flags or suits of armor. I try to, for the most part, if there's something that's appropriate, pick some kind of flag or banister type item that I can place throughout that represents that idea. So for this castle, because they had already used those items in her throne room, I felt like it made sense to maybe use that as like the royal insignia. So I put them all over the castle, and luckily we have a banner that's perfect and it looks like it's hand stitched, a little bit more appropriate for the time period, and that became like the royal household's little logo. So when you see suits of armor standing next to peafowl banners and you see additional peafowl statue in the hallways and in the walkways, that's why. And I guess the reason that I think it doesn't really fit is because I think of Jasmine when I think of that for some reason, but they used it for her. So I just used it in like swatches of gold and white and things that really match the aesthetic of the castle anyway. And I don't think it looks out of place. It really adds to the colorful element as well. The drapery all over the castle is like bright shades of red and purple and gold and deep, true, rich blue. So those are all colors that correspond anyway with a bright sort of like peafowl color palette. And it works. It looks all good together, I think. We are transitioning upstairs This is still the front end of the castle, but it is the area immediately above the throne room. And this is completely the staff wing of the castle. There are 3 bedrooms up here, 2 that are a full double bed. So I thought that those could be somebody that are a little bit higher ranking in terms of the staff. So maybe the head maid or the major domo, or just somebody that's a little bit more important. In fact, one of them has its own attached bathroom as well. So there's somebody who is on staff that is very much like top dog, and they would get that bedroom with a double bed and their own private bathroom attached to their own quarters. Even Snow does not have that. So big deal. And then there's another room that I did. They're identical. A lot of the staff spaces are going to be decorated like not super intricately. They're for characters that are unnamed. They are going to be the same color palette and the same sort of items that I've been using throughout the rest of the castle, but I don't have to put that level of detail into it the way I would for like Snow White's bedroom. Same sort of bedroom, but still large, double bed. And then there's one more additional room that has 3 beds in it. So I figured that that would be for a cluster or group of somebody who does the same task. I'm thinking probably the knights. I have at least 2 knights in the household currently, so maybe that's like the knights' quarters. There's also a little bit of a sitting space up here with its own fireplace, like a living room type situation. And this area of the castle has direct access to the exterior walkways that the guardsmen would patrol. So it makes sense that the knights would live in this section of the castle because they can get ready and go straight out to where they would be patrolling for the most part on those exterior upstairs path and walkways. Some of that exterior is attached to like outdoor towers, and the towers vary in terms of like what I decided to do with them, but a lot of them are very simple. They're essentially like sitting spaces, maybe an additional bedroom, areas where guardsmen can like guard the towers where they can sit and look out and guard the towers. So when it comes to making defense towers, there's really nothing that I can put in those spaces. I think in the future, what I could possibly do, and like has crossed my mind, is that I could put some of the archery type items in that area and say that it's almost like, well, they're using bow and arrow to like protect the upper parts of the castle. And that is something that might be accurate from a certain perspective. But at the same time, the items that I feel like came with Adventure Awaits are still like not appropriate for what I'm trying to depict. So I might like add some of that stuff in later. Adventure Awaits is really tough for me. I've already talked about this in a previous video, so I'm not going to go into it too much. It's definitely a I'm going to wait till it's on sale to buy it kind of pack for me. So there won't be integration of Adventure Awaits into the Disney save well until it's on sale. And I don't even mean like normally what they'll do is in a couple months, they'll do maybe like a 20 or 30% off. I'm not waiting for that. I want the 50% off. I'm waiting till they do the Christmas sale. I'll wait until the pack's been out for a year and they put it on like some kind of mega sale. That's how much I'm willing to wait for that pack. The pack comes with a lot of items that are going to be helpful for the Disney save, but at the same time, it just can wait. It's going to be okay. I already have the fairies overhaul that I need to do to the save, so I don't need anything else on my plate right now. I need to get through this world. I need to get through the fairies overhaul, and then I need to do Innisgreen, and then I might start looking at where can I work in Adventure Awaits, because there are quite a few things that come with that. There's playground equipment. I have done playgrounds in my save file, so it might be good to like maybe go back and add some of that in depending on what they have put into the pack. Although I kind of like mine, like back when I did my playground, I made my own jungle gym without using their modular set, and there's a part of me that like wants to keep that because I handmade it and it works and it's functional and it's unique. So whereas using those items will be super helpful in a future build, and I'm sure I will build like another playground somewhere in the Disney save, especially now that they have changed and added the lot type, it makes it unique if I maybe don't use the modular play stuff for all of my playgrounds. We are going to be moving to the back part of the build momentarily. Like I've been mentioning, everything on this back end is the Evil Queen stuff. It either belongs to her or it doesn't belong to her, but she wants it to be close to her. So anything that's valuable and important, there is a gallery that's going to be on this end of the castle. And again, even if the gallery was located somewhere else previously, she would have had the gallery relocated to her wing of the castle. And the reason that I did this is because my castle collection book specifically mentioned that the treasury for this castle is located in the tippy top of the tallest tower, kind of above of the evil queen's bedroom. And the book mentions something to the extent of the treasury is as close to the queen as possible. Like she brought the stuff in that was valuable to her side of the castle. So there is a small treasury on this end of the castle. It's more of like a magical based treasury. Her bedroom was over here. The potions room, access to the dungeon is also over here. I thought that that obviously made sense for her character. And anything like relating to evil queen stuff. Oh, the mirror room. The mirror room is another one of those big rooms that was featured in the book as very important. And I hadn't mentioned it up until this point, but it is included in the build today. Her end of the castle, I am jumping around quite a bit because although I had already really found my footing with what I wanted to use and how to decorate and all of my items, and I had a really easy time with the front end of the castle, this is essentially a different castle that's using the same items. You have to think about like, how do I make it a little darker, a little bit more evil queen-esque without making it feel like two completely different builds. I also had a reference for the evil queen's bedroom specifically from my book, which is why I am choosing this specific color palette and the reds and the brown colors that they chose for this room. I think that this room was probably the former king and queen's bedroom, and now she obviously lives in it, and for whatever reason she just hasn't made like a ton of changes to it, because when you look at it you're not going to aesthetically think evil queen necessarily, but this is what the book was depicting, and I really loved having the reference. So I always stray a little bit from the reference in terms of I'm going to add things that make it more playable, I'm going to simplify things that are not possible to the game, but I am doing a recreation. So although it's like a color palette that I wouldn't have chosen, I think it's very royal, it's fitting of a king and queen, and so it's okay. It like, even though it doesn't scream her character, it still works in a sense. But I was definitely still trying to figure out how I was going to do everything over here and what the rules were, the new rules for evil queen related stuff, how dark and creepy I actually wanted to go. For certain rooms like the dungeon and the potion room, this is pretty obvious. Like you can go a lot more witchy scary, but maybe not so much for the bedroom, maybe not so much for the gallery. And I will say something you'll see me fighting throughout this entire video is columns and wall trimming. I was having just the most difficult time with wall trimming in this castle, and there are certain sections where you're seeing probably the wall trim peek into rooms that it's not supposed to be in. Like for example, it happens in the throne room and in the evil queen's bedroom itself. There is exterior wall trim that is coming inside, and I tried to do everything I know how to do to get rid of this. The issue is platforms. When you add platforms to a bedroom, it breaks the functionality of bedrooms sometimes. It doesn't know where to like place heights of everything, and it doesn't really understand that the room is fully indoors. So it tries to place exterior wall trim on the interior because it thinks that like parts of the room are outside. That's the only thing I can reason. It happens every single time I use platforms, and sometimes I'm avoidant of using platforms for those very reasons, but this is a castle where it's really necessary and it really adds something. And also for castles in general, when you're doing these huge rooms, you want to have varying levels to the rooms because otherwise it just feels like these very like large flat open spaces, and it's not realistic for a castle like this. There would be little nooks to sit in by the window, and the beds would be raised off the floor sometimes, and maybe the fireplace is raised off the floor, or you've got entertainment spaces that have multi-layer stages and things of that nature. So it works in here and it looks really good, but the caveat is that now I have to deal with the exterior trimming coming to the interior. And when you do that, bonus points, the columns try to fit themselves to the height of the trim. So then you've got columns of two different heights inside of spaces because some of them are touching the trim and some of them are touching the ceiling. Very aggravating. And I'm trying to use Tool to like mitigate it, but I ultimately what I decided is I had to ignore it for most of the build. There are some times when I'm like trying to fix it because it's driving me crazy, but I got to a point where I realized I have to just ignore it. And then the very last thing I did in this entire castle, once I was like completely satisfied with everything, I went around with Tool and tried to re-heighten the columns all to the appropriate sizes so that everything is very straight and sitting at the correct heights. And it should stick for the most part. What I didn't think about, and this is like so unfortunate for me, but not a you problem, very much a me problem. I'm building in my build save file, and I always do this just in case there's like crashing or like last exceptions or just anything weird is to happen. It's not the actual Disney save itself. And now I have to move this castle over to the Disney save. And I know that when I transfer this over the gallery, those columns are going to try to resize. So I get to do it all again. So I guess I wasted my time on that, but it looks really good for the screenshots that are going to be at the end of the video. And yeah, it's just something that it's been like a glitch in the game forever and ever and ever. And they've just never fixed it. It's kind of like round walls and round rooms. There's certain things that happen when you use those, which are like one of the reasons why I just don't love using them. And even for a castle like this, for all of my little towers and things, I could have used round rooms, but it would have created such a hugely complicated, probably not super functional build. All these towers that I have decorated into libraries and treasuries and little intricate spaces and sitting rooms and really utilized everything, I probably would have had to just like close some of those round spaces off because they won't attach well to the rest of the castle and that kind of an idea. And I just wish that they would fix it. I wish that they would not introduce build features that are like game changing, like platforms. It was such a big deal when they came out. And then they just don't really work that well and you don't actually want to use them all that much. I feel the same way about landscaping. People say all the time, I wish they had auto roofs. I'm telling you right now, they wouldn't work well. I don't know why anybody is like, I wish we could get that. It's not going to work well. I think they should spend time doing other things, if I'm so honest, because you're going to get it and it's never going to work. I am sorry. I don't mean to be so negative. I guess because this build was like so important to me and everything was working out perfect. And I'm so happy with how everything turned out. And I spent weeks and weeks and weeks on this to have it ruined, not ruined, but like little things are not fully flush and there's exterior trim on the interior and it's not perfect because of the game's glitches and not because of my like lack of being able to build or my lack of whatever. Very aggravating. I'm like fighting the game. I'm always fighting the game. Some of you might be wondering if there's any inspiration from the live action in my Snow White castle. I'm gonna say not really. I did not have any images up of the live action when I was building. It did come to mind that if I needed it, I could potentially pull from it. And that's the way that I really go about most of the Disney princess specifically, but any live actions. If I really, really am stuck on something and I need a space or a jumping off point, I might go look and see what the live action did for the kitchen. Like I remember that the kitchen was shown in the live action. There are other spaces, the dining room I think was shown. So there are reference points that I could have used. I don't like using live actions because I feel like a lot of the times they are quite a bit different than the animated version. There are exceptions to this, most definitely. I have used a little bit. No, I've definitely used, I think, the most from all the live action Disney princess movies. The Aladdin movie was really inspirational for a lot of Jasmine's costuming that I used in the Disney save. I gave her so many outfits that are based on the live action. I might take a look at Snow's and see if I can give her a couple of outfits that are like a nod to the live action. I definitely used the live action for some of the Beauty and the Beast stuff, but I really, really try to stick with the animateds for the most part. And when it comes to the Snow White live action, I don't think it's any surprise to most of you that I wasn't a huge fan of the entire thing. I love Rachel Ziegler though, and no slander towards her whatsoever. I've never been on the bandwagon of hating on that poor woman. There was a time on the internet not too long ago where it was like super cool to make fun of her and think that she was super annoying and just say all these horrible things about her. I have never had poor things to say about her. I've never seen anything that I didn't like. She's incredibly talented. She was the best part of the movie by far. She was not the reason that that movie was weird. And if you loved the movie, awesome. I don't even think it was like as terrible as everybody was saying it was. People were like, it was the worst movie I've ever seen. No. I will show you some bad movies. If you have not seen, there are certain movies that you could not even argue were worse than that. I think people just really wanted to hate something and people really don't like her. And it's such a shame. She's so incredibly talented. She was recently performing in London for Evita, where she would come out and sing to the streets of London from the theater. Like one of her numbers was performed to an outdoor balcony. It was phenomenal. I never got to actually go see it in person. I do live in London, but she came at like a really poor time for me to be able to like go see her. I had my New York trip around the time. It was just like bad timing. I never got a chance. I'll probably always regret it. It's so much talent wrapped up in one little person, and everything I saw on TikTok was incredible. Nothing but nice things to say about her. She was great in the film. She did the best she could with a really, really poor situation. The costuming is some of the weirdest I've ever seen, definitely. Gal Gadot's acting is some of the cringiest stuff I've ever seen in my life. So sorry. So sorry. Do have bad things to say there. But I definitely don't have anything revolutionary to say that hasn't been said 1,000 times about the film. I just didn't use it as inspiration for this. I felt like they took a lot of storytelling creative liberties with it in general, probably because the film isn't long enough to make like a full movie production off of. So they really needed some stuff to add in and make it a little bit more interesting and give Snow some character. And I could have used the castle, because it's definitely shown in a lot more detail. But I would say in the live action, it's definitely very dark because the evil Queen fully is like in power and she just rules with like a heavy hand. And it just seems like everyone in the castle is very miserable. Every room is very dark and creepy. That's not exactly the vibe I wanted to go for this castle. I did do it a lot more for her end, as you can see, like the lighting is just not there. Darker colors, some of the darker stone textures and some darker things are like coming into play on her side of the castle compared to the front especially. But other than that, I didn't feel like there was pretty much anything from that movie that I really wanted to pull in. Maybe some of the outfits that the love interest wears I could use for Florian, just because he's rarely shown. I don't think he's shown in any other outfits, and I haven't made him yet. I also haven't talked about him yet. I think that he might be a townie. I have not created him as of me doing today's video. I'm not quite sure. I like honestly just completely forgot about him a little bit. I know that I'm going to be doing the video for the castle staff. That is something that you'll be seeing in the somewhat near future. I will be doing a refresh on the cottage, depending on how much footage that actually creates. I'll make a video out of it. It might not. I don't know. I haven't taken a look at that cottage in a little while. And then I probably would fit him in somewhere around there. There are other lots in this neighborhood. There are 2 more. One of them is going to be going to Happily Ever After, which is the Snow White garden that used to be in Hemford on Bagley. It's getting moved over here. It's also going to need a refresh so that it can be retrofitted to the lot. And I'm going to be updating it so that it doubles as a cemetery. And I think that's going to be the primary lot type. That's kind of funny because it is quite literally Snow White's cemetery. Like it's her final resting place. I originally had it in the Disney save as a generic, but the problem with that is that Sims don't really spawn on generic lot types. I wanted it to be a garden, but we don't have a garden lot type in The Sims, other than if you have community spaces that the one that you vote for from Eco Living, those have a garden option. But that's not what I wanted to do because I would have had to create 4 versions of the lot, and that's just not what I was trying to do. So it was a generic, but now we have cemeteries, and this is the Ravenwood Ghost Cemetery world. So we need to have cemeteries here. And I have another cemetery that's planned for a different movie, but I feel like because it's already a generic and because it is technically Snow White's like final resting place, it does make sense to go ahead and just transition that into a cemetery. So I think that's what I'm going to do. But it's going to be a really bright, colorful, lively apple garden cemetery, like the nicest princess cemetery you've ever seen, which is quite a bit different than the other cemeteries I've made in the save so far. And I'm not going to spoil the last one, but it is Snow White and the 7 Dwarfs themed is the final lot that goes in this neighborhood. By the time you guys are hearing this, I am 30-ish days, more or less, out from my Disneyland trip. I am so excited. It's the only thing that's been getting me through this year. Literally. There's been so much that's been going on this year, and I am excited to go back home. I love a little trip to the US. There's so many reasons. My family, number one. I'm going with my sister, girls trip, sister's trip. I mean, my husband's going and her boyfriend is definitely going to, so it's not really a girls trip, but it always is nice to see her and spend time with her. We have been so lucky to get together every couple of years-ish to go to a Disney park. It's always been Disney World though. This is all of our first times to Disneyland, California. And we are just like so excited. It feels like such great timing in terms of them having the celebration and feeling lucky enough to be able to participate in that as well. It's going to be my niece's birthday. Very, very exciting to spend a birthday with her. I never get to do that ever. I've been like traveling basically her whole life. So I have only ever spent one birthday with her. This is huge for me. And as I've been mentioning to you guys, it's my 30th birthday this December. I'm born on Christmas Eve. So if I'm going to plan anything for my birthday, I have to usually do it before or way after. And sometimes I just skip doing anything altogether. But I figured since it's my 30th, I really should put out, we should go somewhere special. And one big trip to Disneyland that we'll probably never do together again as a family is definitely the one. We are all like texting nonstop about it. Very excited. It's all I talk about. My bags are already packed. Hopefully the weather's good. I do like it a little bit cool. You guys know I talk about it all the time. I love the chilly weather. I go out in London and it's like 65 degrees and everyone's got their winter jackets and their scarves on and like mittens, and everyone's so miserable about the weather. And to me, it is perfect. It's like perfect. I'm in a t-shirt down in London and everyone's staring at me funny. I've become accustomed to actually like I will try to wear jackets here in somewhat of an effort to fit in aesthetically, because everybody is so wintered up that I just get stared at to no end. Like people will just gawk at me like I'm crazy, and I am getting a little bit sick of that. So I have started wearing jackets out into London even when I do not want a jacket. I find the tubes to be so hot. I run hot in general though. I remember my sister came to visit a few years ago and she asked me, she came in February, which is very cold. That's like, to me, February is like some of the coldest weather that I'm used to on the East Coast of the US ever. But I also think it's pretty cold here, but like not the way that London treats it. Like there's no snow. It's not negative temperatures that I'm used to. And she was coming in, no, actually she would have been coming in November. I don't know what I'm talking about. She was coming in November and she was like, is it cold? I'm like, yeah, it's cold. I would wear like some kind of like a puffer jacket of some kind, like a lighter winter jacket or thicker sweaters without a coat. I don't get hot. I find the tube, like having to run around London on the tube, so hot, so claustrophobic. Everybody is all bundled up and I'm sweating. So I love the colder weather. I'm excited. I keep checking the temperatures for California and seeing it getting cooler and cooler and getting like progressively more happy. I'm really excited to experience California Adventure. It is a park, obviously, that's exclusive to that Disneyland specifically. So I've never experienced any kind of like a Cars land. I have done Avengers Campus, but I've done it at the Paris Disneyland twice. It's very, very, very small at the Paris Disneyland. I don't know if it's as small in California. Obviously, I'm going to find out. The one in Paris needs an expansion or another ride or two desperately. I was like very disappointed. There's a lot of standing around in the Paris one, especially if there's no characters out, which you do get kind of lucky. I have met Star-Lord, I've met Loki and Thor, I've met Spider-Man a few times, depending on what movie and stuff is coming out. I've met a lot of characters over there, so you do get really lucky with character meet and greets, and I love that Disneylands tend to have characters walking around. Like I've met Mad Hatter just walking around in Disneyland Paris, and Disneyland California also has that. For Disney World, you have to wait in line, always. If you want to meet a character, there's never going to be a character just wandering around. I did once see Peter Pan wandering around one of my trips to Disney World, but he runs, like he's sprinting. I don't even know if he was technically like walking around so much that he was trying to get to his next location without anybody bothering him possibly. But yeah, characters don't wander, so I'm excited for like that aspect. There is a 70th anniversary key thing that they're doing right now that you can take this giant light up key and plug it into all the different lands and unlock the doors, and there's a prize inside of the key. I'm excited. I can't wait to like do it. I'm gonna do it with my niece. She doesn't know yet, but we're gonna do that. And we've got a lot of like cute plans and things coming. Sometimes my niece listens to these videos, believe it or not. She's little, but she does. So I am not going to talk too much about it and spoil it for her, because it is a little bit of a birthday celebration for her. If you are a Disneyland local and you have any must-dos, must-tries, especially especially food. I am a huge foodie. Give me all your recommendations down below, your number one, like, must eat, must ride, favorite things, any shows. We are going to be there, luckily, for some of like the final presentations for the I don't know exactly what the parade is called, but it's like their light up nighttime parade that they have been doing for a limited time. They're taking it away soon-ish, and we're going to make the cutoff, which is so cool because I've never ever gotten to do a night parade. They don't really run them at Disney World, and that's usually where I go. And they've never done any in any of the times that I went to Disneyland Paris. But I know they have like the Main Street Electrical Parade at California. It's just that I've never gotten to go. So we're excited to like have that experience as well. That's my personal number one, followed by Fantasmic, because I'm a huge Fantasmic lover. But obviously I have to see both versions. I have to see the original. But if you have any recommendations, if you would be so kind as to leave them for me, I would so appreciate it. I'm making a little list. I've got to make a list of all of my snacks and things that I know I want to get. There's like definitely some that are very high on my list. I won't bore you with my food details, but I have been making a list. So if you have any that you think I should add to that, let me know. I do want to mention when it comes to the mirror room, I've thought a lot about this magic mirror situation. The magic mirror is very much a character. He is one of the only characters that the evil queen ever really like has dialogue with and genuinely interacts with. It is the only semblance of like some kind of a friend, and I say that very loosely, that you could possibly have. And I know that according to my husband, in Once Upon a Time, because I never got this far, trust, I never got past the Peter Pan season, but in Once Upon a Time, I think that he is like a fully living named character and somebody that is sort of trapped inside of the mirror. This could be true in Snow White, although I don't believe there is necessarily any information in the movie that specifically indicates that he is like a person that's trapped in the mirror. But I kind of like that in concept. So I've been trying to think of ways to bring him to life. And I knew I was going to do the magic mirror room and have like a place where she can go and speak to him. And something that I did throughout this end of the castle is the mirror I used for the magic mirror, that round oval one. There's the main one downstairs in like the magic mirror room. And then there are a few others in her wing of the castle. And I thought of those as like portals that the magic mirror could jump around. And I know that that's not something that's depicted in the movie, but I'm just adding a little bit of life to it. I don't know. So those mirrors that are like the specific same black round one, I placed a few here and there in like her potions room, her bedroom, so that the mirror could move to different mirrors and communicate with the evil queen in different spaces without having to be moved. And that's like one idea of bringing him to life in some aspect. But my husband has been really persistent that I should actually just make him into a playable character, because he says that in a sense, the magic mirror is sort of an equivalent to the Beauty and the Beast, like object characters. And I can see where he's coming from, because it's kind of like just the mirror that talks. And so it could be any of the furniture objects from the Beauty and the Beast castle that also talks. I see what he means by that. So there was like maybe at some point a thought to, in the room, the magic mirror room itself, make a bedroom and have the mirror be a window instead, and lock the sim inside of the bedroom and have the evil queen be able to, if I could find some way that they could still talk, but that the magic mirror sim could never leave the room itself. That was an idea. And I still am like partially toying with this idea. One of the reasons I did not do it is because the access to the dungeon is right behind the magic mirror wall. And that really is the space that a bedroom would have gone in that circumstance. But I couldn't figure out a way on the floor plan to get the stairs to go where I needed them to go downstairs. Like, it was really the only place that the stairs could go. So I was having like a floor plan issue, but I also wasn't 100% sure that I loved the magic mirror locked in the bedroom idea. And I feel like that could cause some user error. And I mean this like very kindly, but say for example, you try to like travel somewhere with the magic mirror and then you've like removed him effectively from that room and now you can't get him back in there, or people don't know how, or people don't understand why I've locked him in that room. They like, I'll get messages on Patreon that'll be like, did you know that you have the magic mirror guy locked in that room? Like, they won't get it. And so I thought maybe I wouldn't do it just to save myself like the confusion and the questions on people who don't get the joke or don't like the joke. And so I'm throwing it out there as like, maybe you could do that if you like the idea. If you could find a way to rework the floor plan on the mirror room floor and you want to like put him in the room and like lock him in the room and then do some kind of like a window arch situation so that they can still speak through the walls. I don't know. I was gonna have to like play with it to figure out how I could get it all to function correctly, but that was definitely an idea that was presented. Let me know what you would have thought of that down below. I would definitely like to hear general thoughts. It's like kind of funny, but it's also maybe, I don't know, a little morbid, a little too much. I have people who tell me their children play with my save files, so I try not to like go over the top with things. But I am still toying with the idea of fully turning him into a person, a playable sim, because I do like the idea that the evil queen has someone that's like a direct henchman that she can interact with. And I think what I would do, and I haven't done this yet, that's why it's like maybe I'm hesitant, but I'm also like, it is kind of a fun idea and it's a good way to like add a character that is recognizable to the save file for Snow White, but at the same time it's a character that people know rather than some of my other castle staff that are just like general and people don't know who they are. But I think I would definitely lock him to just the evil queen's side of the castle. I don't know that anybody that lives with the evil queen really knows the full extent of like her magic and what she can do, and they probably like have an inkling, and the staff that work here would come and like help her bathe and bring her meals, and they would go through the potions room and they would probably know to like some extent what she is doing, but they might not know what she's capable of. And I don't know that they know that she talks to a magic mirror on the wall. I don't know. I can't recall any characters of her like being present for that or any other like guards or anybody seeing her do that or use magic directly. And I think even in the live action, she possibly doesn't as well. Like she doesn't necessarily use magic in front of anybody. So I'm not saying that it's a secret, but it might be something that people just don't talk about unless they're like truly, truly alone in the castle staff like area and they think they can get away with it. So I thought maybe personify the magic mirror by actually making him a playable sim, but keep him locked and confined to this side of the castle. If I do that, I am going to have to rework this side of the castle just a little bit because I'm going to have to give him like a small sleeping area, but I also could give him skills that he never has to, not skills, traits, so that he never really has to sleep. Like he could be a very magical entity. I don't know. It's one of those things where it's like you could go any direction with it. And I think that unfortunately people will be annoyed that I added like my own spin to the story. Sometimes I get that. It would be annoying like sometimes from the outside perspective if somebody was not me, like if someone random was making the Disney save and they were adding all these little bits of lore and adding all these random things, I definitely would get somewhat like, I wish that it was a little bit more streamlined. I wish that it was more stuck to like canon. And I try to do that a lot, like a lot. And that's why I'm such a stickler on it, because my thought is that everybody can add those things that they want to themselves. Like if you want to make Hercules and Ariel cousins, because technically according to like Greek god lineage, they would be cousins and things like that. Those are not canon things inside the Disney universe, but you can definitely add them. And like, I think that's creative and wonderful and people should add the things that like bring them joy. But I try not to do too much of that stuff so that people don't get annoyed with me, but also sometimes it's really funny and it's really fun. And I miss that I used to do more of those things. Every once in a while, I would just like add my own little flavor and my own little information and put something in that gives more life, especially to a story like this where you have so much lacking information on the story and it's such a quick old film where we just don't really know. We don't know a lot about everything that's going on here. So it needs a little bit of flavor in some instances. And so I'm hesitant, but I also am like, how funny would that be if he was just like this green, glowy, supernatural creature that sort of like haunted this end of the castle and was also low-key her friend, but like not her friend. Like he's very much there by circumstance and he can help her in the henchman kind of way with magical stuff. So let me know your thoughts. I haven't done it as of yet. I'm thinking I will, but also if I do it and you hate it, just delete him. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm always like, yeah, if you hate something I do, just get rid of it. So if you're like, yeah, no, I don't like that at all and that doesn't make sense to me, just when you load up the household, go into cast and hit X and just delete. So it's not really like a terrible thing for me to maybe add in my opinion. Now, according to my book, her potions room should have been probably on the lower levels of the castle, like underground. There should have been winding stairs of some kind that led down to some kind of like a more secret potions room. And I think that plays into the aspect again that the castle staff might not even know that she is magical in that way, but I just couldn't do it because of the layout of this castle. And this is a really, really annoying and like specific thing, but one of the drawbacks of me doing the split castle and raising the back part up so high is that the game will not let me place basement levels that are matching the same walls as the back part of the castle because it drags the landscaping up to the height of the foundation. That probably only made partial sense, but basically it looks really bad if you try to add basements that are as big or larger than the back foundation, because it's going to try to like match the height of the foundation underground. So it makes like really tall platforms outside. I don't know how else to say that. It just looks terrible. It drags the floor up really high. And the only solution to this is that you can make basement levels, but they have to be smaller than the foundation that you're building underneath. So I was able to build a very small dungeon on the bottom level, but I definitely couldn't have done more than that. Like I tried so many different ways to get it to stretch bigger so that I could make a larger dungeon, or so I could make maybe some kind of like a staircase down a few layers so that I could do the potions room underground where it probably should have been. And I just could not get it to sit correctly without it deleting and moving a bunch of stuff. And I was so happy with the exterior at this point. And I did have this huge room right above the mirror room that's outside of her bedroom. And I wasn't really sure what to do with this space. And I just decided we're going to do it as the potions room, because even though it's a little bit more prevalent and it's very much like shown, it's also, that's why I've been playing into this idea that maybe the staff don't really go over here. So she's got all her lots of magical items. Actually, I pulled from all the different packs. I think she would be a pretty strong magical user. She would have resources because she's royal in the way that like she might be able to source weird ingredients. Again, this is just like a lot of information that we just don't know about her. Like we don't know how strong she is. You could say that Maleficent is probably a more powerful sorcerer. Maleficent like looks aesthetically a little bit more scary. She turns herself into a dragon, but we could definitely assume that the evil queen is a master at potions making, perhaps, and being able to turn poison apples and create like objects that are a little bit more organic. So she would have lots of ingredients around for potions making, poisoning, things like that. I thought that that made sense. So with that comes a lot of little clutter. And actually the potions room is shown in the book. So I was looking at like all the little bottles and things. It very much implied that she had a lot going on, a lot of things that she can mix into her cauldron, a lot of dried herbs, empty bottles, and that ended up pulling from all packs. I thought even like Crystal Creations could add a little bit in here and there. There's lots of stuff in the debug from Life and Death. Love to sprinkle some Life and Death in the world that it comes from. I also used even some fairy stuff, although I'm trying to like be a little bit hesitant about making every spellcaster into a like putting the apothecary table in for every single spellcaster. But I do, once again, because she's like making poison apples and you're leaning into the ailments and the diseases like aspect of magic, I do think that it's appropriate to give it to her and give her a skill in that. There was also lots of books being shown. Her cauldron, of course, she's got the big black cauldron up on the pedestal that she actually like, I think she actually makes the apple inside of that. And then off of her potions room is a small treasury, and the treasury has more magic based items. And I think that that could be like one of two things. It could either be that the castle has a different treasury that keeps like gold and jewels and those kinds of things, but the evil queen wanted the more magically important items specifically moved to her quarters, or it was already here and she built the potions room around it. Could be either way. But I've got some different urns from the different packs. The fairies urn, the mermaids urn. I thought it would be like a cool way to use them. And even though they're urns, they're magical based items because they look just like so different and fantasy leaning. And you could almost think of it as like a little bit of essence of the fairy and essence of a werewolf or essence of a vampire. Like it could still be ingredients in a weird way. They would just be magical based, occult leaning, rare ingredients. Like how hard would it be to source essence of fairy and essence of vampire, if you catch my drift? I thought it was a really cool way to use the items and have them displayed in this fashion somewhere in the Disney save without it being completely out of place. This is very much a room where a lot of different occults can mesh together, because I feel like if you're doing potions making, all occults in a sense could like dabble in potions making depending on like how you wanted to spin it. Not actually in the game, right? Like in the Sims 4, you have to be a spellcaster to do potions, but in a real fantasy setting, potions making is something that perhaps someone who is not a spellcaster but like is aware of the magical world, if you knew the right ingredients and could get them, you could kind of get into. So even like werewolves could maybe do potions, and even fairies could maybe do potions. With that comes the necessity of like all sorts of ingredients from all the different occults. And since she is into potions making, you can have like an array of occult stuff. She also got her own private library. It is a very spellcaster leaning private library. It has the tarot book. There are some tarot card references in there. That was my little way of like splashing life and death into this build as well. I didn't really mention this, but earlier in the video, I should have said that for all intents and purposes, Horn King's castle and Snow White's castle are actually very aesthetically similar. I've used the castle estate kit and the same wallpaper, the same columns, the same doors and windows and everything. It's just as if one of them is like upkept and taken care of and actively ruling over a kingdom, and the other one is broken and dirty and abandoned and rotting. So it's the same castle. Like they're really good in the neighborhood together. Well, they're not in the same neighborhood, same map. They look really good in the world together. Like they almost match, even though they're from two very tonally different, completely different Disney movies. It works in this world together so well, and everything seems like it's flowing really, really well, because I had this thought of, well, I'm going to use a similar-ish set of items. Don't get me wrong, Horn King's Castle is definitely using a lot more rustic and rundown sort of items, a lot of the like horses pack kind of items especially, whereas this one is more cottage living. I think the drapery that I've used is maybe from the small businesses pack even, so there's definitely a wider array of like active packs in this build, but I did it on purpose because I wanted it to be less jarring between the two different movies. And altogether, the two neighborhoods, even though different films, they're still aesthetically going to look like good together in this world. And splashing in like Ravenwood stuff, life and death stuff here and there where I most definitely can. And as we transition to the dungeon, you're going to see what I was talking about. Like this is the maximum space that I could do down here. The two little bump outs that make the actual dungeon rooms. One of them is, I guess, a nicer dungeon room. It has an actual bed in it. I always just do that, not because it like makes sense. Like I don't even think they would provide a bed in this instance, but because if you actually locked a sim down here, you're probably going to need the toilet and you're probably going to need the bed. Otherwise, they're gonna, you know. The other one is more what a dungeon room probably was more actually really like. And this is the Evil Queen's dungeon after all. So I don't think Snow goes down here. I don't think Snow even knows that they have this necessarily. Actually, she might. I think it's mentioned in the movie. I'm not sure. But she probably doesn't, you know, deal with this very often. So this would very much be the Evil Queen's thing. And it's dirty down here. There are some guardsmen, there's some knights, and some fireplaces and stuff actively being kept up on so that they can guard. But if I had made it any bigger, it was ripping the flooring above it all sorts of different directions with the landscaping. It was driving me crazy. So unfortunately, that's kind of all we get in terms of the dungeon, but it's a light nod, and it's there and it's usable, which is cool. But it's not the main focus of this castle, like I mentioned earlier. The next thing you can expect to see from me is the tour video for the castle, followed by the Create a Sim that will include the Evil Queen, a little refresh on Miss Snow White, and all of the castle staff that I mentioned. They came out so cute, and I am really excited about them, by the way, so definitely stay tuned for that. More Snow White stuff to come. We also have 2 other movies for this world after Snow White. And I'm going to let my patrons vote on which one they want first. So I don't know what we're moving to after Snow White, but it's going to be a little bit ways away anyway now. There's more Snow White stuff to come in the immediate future. I hope you guys enjoyed the castle. Let me know all of your thoughts on everything down below. If you would like to support the Disney Save on Patreon, you can do so by clicking the link in my description box down below or the one at the end of the video. Thank you guys so much for watching today, and I will talk to you all in the next one.